this together in application as best as I can. And I want you to really try and nail this down in your minds now. You move from a problematic induction where you are given ideas that have no context, and then they lead you to something devoid of a context. Can I take a step back on that for a moment? I was flying from Delhi to Newark, New Jersey. It's a 14-and-a-half-hour non-stop flight. You celebrate a few birthdays along the way. And while I was flying there, then sitting next to me was an anchor from a major network. I won't name the anchor for the network for you. I knew who he was. He didn't know that I knew who he was. So we just started talking, and he found out what I did and so on. Finally, he started talking about his news network, and I finally said to him, I really don't watch your network anymore. He said, you don't? I said, no. I said, you guys distort everything. And when you have got doors closed and you've still got about 11 hours on the flight, there's no place to go. He said, why do you say that? I said, I've seen the world and I've seen your stories. You guys latch on to one slender thread of one story or one little finger, and you think you've grabbed the fist of reality. I'll give you a couple of examples. I told him that. And I gave him those examples. I said, do you know what news actually stands for? He didn't. North, east, west, and south. It's the context of total news. I said, and the news you sometimes give is so distorted that actually it ruins my day when I watch it in the morning, so I don't anymore. I'd rather listen to some inspiring songs and get to work. I have to say to you, he was a real gentleman. He was listening very quietly, very patiently. He said, what kind of work do you do? So I told him, most of my work is dealing with people's questions, shattered lives, broken dreams, no answers, no context. I said to him, any text without a context becomes a pretext. We finished chatting, and I gave him the examples of the stories that I felt were thoroughly distorted in their news and actually ended up costing people's lives. We got off in Newark. I'm telling you the truth. I went over to the carousel waiting for my bags to come. He was on this side of the carousel. The plane had unloaded now, a lot of people. I was on the other side. He came over, took his wallet out, gave me his card. He said, Mr. Zacharias, you know what the problem is? He said, you travel, you see, and so you know. We basically entertain people who don't travel and don't see and don't know. I said, and the net result is a manufactured reality that doesn't measure up against the facts. Art Franklin and I, we were talking before, as were Michael. This is not a slam. This is a plea. Don't live with sound bites. Read. Read. Get the story. Get the facts. Get the footnotes. Understand what the bigger picture is. You can't judge a picture by just one little spot on the canvas. It's like us. We love to sing verses 1, 3, and 5 when the songwriter wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How would you like it if you wrote a book and they read pages 1, 7, 9, 11, and 13, and said, I've read the book? But that's what we do. We want, someone said we want sermonettes for the Christianettes. We want it quick. We want it short. We want it brief. And so if the news cannot tell you about the world in 30 minutes, you don't want it. I say to you, the inevitable reduction that takes place because of the induction and seduction. I want to bring this to a close. Elvis Presley's half-brother lives in Georgia. He asked if he could come and spend a morning and an afternoon with me. And I was really flattered and honored by it, Because I was a great Elvis fan when I was a teenager. Bought up all the records. I mean, Elvis Presley died in 1977. I was in the Philippines speaking, and very saddened by it. I think he was one of the great performers and had a great voice, especially with his record on the hymns I loved. And his brother sat across the table from me and we chatted, and I said, "Can you tell me something?" I said, "I've always wanted to know, how come a man who had so much fame, power, money, success, how did he allow himself to be destroyed by drugs?" Do you know what he told me? He said, "Drugs didn't kill Elvis." I said, "Didn't?" He said, "No." He said, "Fame did." He said, "Fame killed him. And when he saw his fame disappearing before his eyes, he resorted to drugs to tranquilize his own loss of identity. In the process, he was gone." You and I sit in front of the screen and think these people are icons. They go back home at night and needed drugs to wake them up, drugs to put them to sleep, drugs to perform, because they were made into somebody that they were never intended to be made into. But the seduction of the camera. And so I want to close with this. A problematic induction, that deadly seduction, and the inevitable reduction. What happens? And with this I close. Please follow me very carefully now. C.S. Lewis made this comment in one of his books that he calls A Pilgrim's Regress. He doesn't call it A Pilgrim's Progress. And the reason he calls it A Pilgrim's Regress is because in his journey through atheism and pantheism and skepticism and nihilism and all of that, he kept searching and searching till he finally found Christ. He said, "I don't know why I rejected everything else along the way, but I knew it didn't fit till I found Christ, so I took a regressive journey because now I had the answer to explain why I'd rejected everything else." And so C.S. Lewis talks about this time along his journey in an allegory, A Pilgrim's Regress. He refers to himself as young John. And as young John, he comes to the mountain called the Spirit of the Age. And he pictures the man heading the Spirit of the Age as kind of a grim Neronian factor who stared down upon the inhabitants of the Spirit of the Age. Isn't it interesting? He did not see it as pleasure or laughter, but grim and austere. And he pictures himself as handcuffed in this mountain. And then comes the waiter and offers him his breakfast, unclasps his hands and gives him the tray, the waiter representing the Spirit of the Age. And he says to him, "Have some milk." And Lewis takes a sip of this milk and says, "Ah, what nourishing, nutritious milk." Hold that in your mind for just a moment, because I want to come to it. When Larry Flint, the pornographer, was being tried for pornography here in Atlanta, the lawyer defending him made an incredible argument. He would bring the witness onto the courtroom scene and would quiz the witness. And he would say this to the witness: "Have you ever gone into an art gallery?" "Yes, sir." "Have you ever paid to go into an art gallery?" "Yes, sir." "Have you ever paid to go into an art gallery where there are paintings of unclad people, naked people, by the grand masters?" "Yeah, I suppose so." "Will you please tell this jury why you paid to go into an art gallery where there were paintings of people in that gallery without any clothes on, and you call that art, and you call my client stuff pornography?" Would you explain that to the jury? He had him. He had him. I thought to myself, what would I say? Of course, they don't get philosophical in a witness stand, you know. But if I sat with that attorney opposite a coffee table, I'd say something like this to him: Do you know when Michelangelo started to paint people without clothes on, his teacher looked at him and said, Michael, why are you doing this? And Michelangelo said, because I want to see man as God sees man. And the teacher looked at him and said, but Michael, you're not God. 1 point. Second point, I would tell him the story of Lewis going through the journey, and he's given the tray of breakfast, and the waiter says to him, here's a glass of milk, drink it. So he drinks it and says, what nutritious, delicious milk, John says. And the waiter says, John, I knew you would say that. Nutritious, delicious milk? Do you know it's just the secretion of a cow? Like its urine? It secretes urine, it secretes milk. You call this nourishing, you call that garbage. And John clasps his ears. Then he made the mistake of commenting on the eggs and how nutritious the eggs were. And he makes an even more bizarre analogy to John of what an egg actually is. And John doesn't know how to handle it. He's rebound again, and the waiter leaves. And then Lewis says this, reason came riding on a horse and rescued me and said to the mountain of the spirit of the age, sir, you lie. You don't know the difference between what nature is meant for nourishment and what nature is meant for garbage. You don't know the difference between what nature is meant for nourishment and what nature is meant for garbage. What I want to say to you is this. If entertainment continues the way it is entertaining us today, we will lose the difference between what nature is meant for nourishment and what nature is meant for garbage. We will not know the difference between what is sacred and what is profane. We find two things having one thing in common, and therefore we think they have everything in common, which is not true. And so the challenge to the world of media, and men like Michael and Art to respond to it positively that way, is this. There's a beautiful song, and I quote and bring it to close. Many times, I put this on in my car by the famed tenor Kenneth McKellar, and I listen to this song. I wish I could sing it for you, but you'd wish a different kind of media. Here's the way this song goes. Seated one day at the organ, I was weary and ill at ease, and my fingers wandered idly over the noisy keys. I know not what I was playing or what I was dreaming then, when I touched one chord of music like the sound of a great Amen. It flooded the crimson twilight like the close of an angel's psalm. It lay on my fevered spirit like the touch of infinite calm. It quieted pain and sorrow like love overcoming strife. It seemed the harmonious echo o'er our discordant life. It linked all perplexed meanings into one perfect peace and trembled away into silence as if it were loath to cease. I have sought, but I seek it vainly, that one lost chord divine which came from the soul of the organ and entered into mine. It may be that death's bright angel will speak in that chord again. It may be that only in heaven I shall hear that grand Amen. Music is a beautiful thing. There are chords that God can play it with. Eye has not seen, ear has not heard, neither has entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. My prayer is, to you young people especially, that you will get into the media and change the status quo. Bring us the music, bring us the stories, Bring us the pictures, bring us the beauty that will lift our minds to the highest, that will only be consummated in heaven. And it may be only in heaven we will have that grand amen. But we can have lots of hints of it now when it is done right, for God is also the God of the visual, and he wants us to glorify him in whatever we think, speak, or say. And so between the problematic induction, the devastating seduction, and the inevitable reduction, may we come to him who is the author of creation and the ultimate resident of what heaven is all about, who wants us to understand beauty, harmony, and the picture that he paints in your life. You are a work of art, and he is the artist. Get into the world and change the way art is done and make a difference. God bless you.